Star FM, sounding good all the time. Good evening, and thank you for making us your number one. It is 23 minutes before 7 o'clock, and many thanks for being a part of us. And as always, on a day and time as this, we discuss issues to take Zimbabwe forward. I am Linda Muriro. Now, the EU delegation to Zimbabwe is set to host the first European Union EU Zimbabwe Business Forum this month in collaboration with the Zimbabwe Investment and Development Agency, ZIDA, Zimtrade, and the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, CZI. And tonight we are going to be hearing more about what the EU Zimbabwe Business Forum seeks to do. What does it mean for our businesses, investment into the country, and so on. And this premier event is coming at a time relations between Zimbabwe and the EU have continued to thaw on the back of President Emmerson Mnangagwa's engagement and re-engagement drive that has built bridges with the Western Bloc. And how far have the two parties gone in mending these relations, and what opportunities await for Zim businesses? This is the conversation we're having tonight with my guest. Stay with us.
This is Muriro on Monday on Star FM. Muriro on Monday. Brace yourself. It's a hard hat area.
And my guest on the show tonight, I'm delighted to have the EU ambassador to Zimbabwe, Ambassador Jobst von Kirchmann. Ambassador, good evening, and thank you very much for coming through to Star FM for the first time ever.
Good evening, Linda. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, and as always, we value the contribution of you, our listeners, so do take part in this discussion, and I will be reading your messages as they come through via our studio WhatsApp platform 0772162651, 0714414413. Those numbers you can phone in after the news at 7 o'clock. Now, to begin with, Ambassador, you are about 2.5 years into your tour of duty in Zimbabwe. How has that been for you?
I think it's a very interesting journey, and I think we have developed a very solid relationship with Zimbabwe, and I mean that in political terms. I think we are a reliable partner. We have been there all the time, and we will be there all the time as a partner. So we could see this in political dialogues we had in the past, that we are able to have a very respectful interaction. We talk to each other. We might not always agree, but I think that's part of it as well. But it became a very, very solid relationship. And in economic terms, I think it's thriving. It's going forward. And you just mentioned the first ever EU Zimbabwe Business Forum. I think that's just one element in many to show that I think on the investment, economic and trade front, we have really driven this relationship forward.
Right, interesting. I was going to ask, but you've touched on that, but I still ask, how would you describe the current state of EU-Zimbabwe relations, especially in terms of economic cooperation? We saw the EU at the just ended ZITF a week ago, and we have this upcoming EU-Zimbabwe Business Forum. How are the relations on the economic front?
Yeah, as I was saying, I think I described it as solid. When I say solid, I mean also we have a solid basis. And the solid basis, for example, is marked by the Economic Partnership Agreement. So we have a free trade agreement between Zimbabwe and the European Union. That's a solid base, yeah. Then I think the European Union, and here I'm talking not only about us, but also the EU member states and our bank as Team Europe, as we often say, we all collectively want to move forward with the private sector in Zimbabwe and also the European private sector. And I think that is part of what we call global gateway, bringing in the private sector as an engine. Because as I often say, it's not the European Union in Zimbabwe creating jobs or investing money. It's the private sector doing that. And governments are a facilitator or enabler, and we are a partner. So we can help to enable, but at the end of the day, it's the private sector. So I think we collectively are moving forward on that agenda, and that has also strengthened the economic relationship with Zimbabwe.
All right, and I'd like to take you back a bit. I'm sure before you came to Zimbabwe, there were perceptions that you had. Those perceptions vis-a-vis the lived experience 2.5 years into your tour of duty in Zimbabwe. How has that been?
Yeah, I think it's different in the sense of if you don't know Zimbabwe, often I think Zimbabwe's reputation is overshadowed by a lot of things which are maybe not in favor of Zimbabwe. But when you live in the country, you discover actually a great country with great people, very educated people and friendly people, and I think. It's a very pleasant country to be in, and also you maybe better understand the context. That's why often economically I also say when companies come from abroad, from Europe for example, it's a very wise decision to work together locally with the company, because you must know the local context. You cannot just come and believe that you know everything. I think that's not true. So I very profoundly believe it's important for anybody who wants to invest or trade with Zimbabwe to come here and to explore what Zimbabwe is.
So that's just one avenue of what foreign businesses especially can do to better appreciate Zimbabwe. But in terms of the other global audience, what more can the country do to address that perception which you say is overshadowed by maybe the not so positive things? What can Zimbabwe do given the thrust that we have where government is saying that Zimbabwe is a friend to all and enemy to none? How can we better Zimbabwe's image to the outside world?
I would start with something Zimbabwe is actually currently doing. And His Excellency, the President Mnangagwa, has put underway an arrears clearance process. That sounds very technical. Zimbabwe has currently a debt and arrears of a bit over $21 billion, and that prevents Zimbabwe from getting access to sovereign lending. And His Excellency has put underway a process to, in the long term, get rid of the debt and arrears and pave the way for sovereign lending. And in reality, that process is much more. It's much more because it brings potentially Zimbabwe back in the international community as a fully respected partner. And so whenever I have a moment, I commend actually that process as a very, very good process, and I really hope that in the foreseeable future we will be able to move forward, because I think that's a key process which goes beyond arrears clearance. It is much more than that, and I think that's probably also the reason why the President attaches so much importance to it.
All right, it is 7:15, and if you've just joined us, you are tuned to Star FM, sounding good all the time. I am Linda Muriro, and tonight on the show, I'm joined by the head of the EU delegation to Zimbabwe, His Excellency Ambassador Jobst von Kirchmann, as we discuss Zim-EU Relations and also the upcoming EU-Zim Business Forum, which will take place this month. So this is what you can expect. We'll also talk about the EU Day, which is coming up on Friday. We'll get to hear more on the significance of that day and what exactly happens. So do keep your messages coming through on 0772-162-651, and I will open the phone lines after the news at 7 o'clock. And other number to take note of is 0714414413. Now, talking about the EU's support to Zimbabwe, can you elaborate, Ambassador, on the EU's support for Zimbabwe's economic reforms and what conditions or expectations are attached?
Now, my reply will probably surprise you. There's no expectation, because we have not we are not pushing for economic reform or anything. I think the economic reforms Zimbabwe wants to undertake as a sovereign country are probably done for two reasons. First of all, to create what I often call a fertile environment for the private sector to invest, to thrive. And secondly, because Zimbabwe has unilaterally, based on the National Development Plan 1, Strategy 1, committed itself to do certain economic reforms in the arrears clearance process. So it's a government-led process. It's not something we suggest or we impose or we have any conditions to it. I would say we are there and we look at it, and as I said before, it's applaudable that economic reforms are undertaken, and I think we of course hope that they will be successful, and that, for example, Zimbabwe in the foreseeable future will be able to sign a staff monitored program with the IMF. That's something which was just discussed in Washington. The Minister of Finance was there, the World Bank was there. So we hope that will be soon coming, but it's a sovereign decision of the government of Zimbabwe.
All right. And how far has Zimbabwe and the EU gone in the implementation of the Economic Partnership Agreement, EU FTA, between Zim and the bloc?
Yeah. So on one hand, we have gone very far, and on the other hand, we haven't gone far enough, I would say, because the Economic Partnership Agreement is actually in place since quite a while, and it allows any Zimbabwean company to export duty and tariff-free to the European market. It does actually not allow exactly the same for European companies. European companies can only export to Zimbabwe around 80% of products. Quite a number of products are exempted, ranging from beverages to cars to a lot of other things. But that's actually fine with us. So I think when I look at the trade figures over the last couple of years, it's quite successful because it's continuously growing. And the European Union today is the biggest buyer of horticulture products. That's, I think, it's something amazing. Yeah? So there's a huge interest in the European Union to buy from Zimbabwe. And I think we have also seen an increase in imports. So we see that Zimbabwean companies are buying machinery from several EU member states. I think that's also positive. So somehow we have reached, I think, 4th or 5th place in the trade statistics now, which is good. But on the other hand, I think it's not good enough. Linda, when I go around and I talk to a group of companies I haven't seen before, I always find at least 2, 3 they have never heard about a free trade agreement or an EPA. So they simply do not know that they can export duty and tariff free to the EU, or that they can import a lot of goods from the EU tariff and duty free. And I think that's something I really would like to work on, and I'm currently actively working on it. It could be information, it could be seminars, conferences, EU Zimbabwe Business Forum. These are all means to broaden the knowledge about that. And I hope, and I often say I hope that in the foreseeable future we will hit the $1 billion mark as trade volume.
All right, and I'm sure we have a lot of business people following through. I see the phone lines are buzzing, and maybe we'll get to hear from them as you push on that agenda of raising awareness of these agreements that are there. Now, moving on to the EU Zim Business Forum, Ambassador, what are the primary objectives that the EU seeks to achieve with this upcoming EU Zimbabwe Business Forum?
First of all, in itself, it's quite a decision. Because you see, it's the first ever EU Zimbabwe Business Forum. What does it mean? Why we are setting that up? Because we feel the time is ripe. There's an opportunity. Companies, European companies could come here and they could look into opportunities in Zimbabwe. But we also believe, what I just said, that there is room for increasing the trade between Zimbabwe and the European Union. Let's not forget the European Union is the biggest trade bloc in the world, with 27 member states and 460 million people. It's enormous. So somehow our expectation is that we have a lot of European companies there, that we do a lot of matchmaking, because I believe, and I said it before, that Zimbabwean companies and European companies should match, should work together, because for a European company to come here and do a grassroots development, I think it's not so easy. So you need a local partner. I believe it is interesting for Zimbabwean private sector to meet, for example, financial services, equity funding and others, because there is a shortage of capital in the market. I believe it is very important and interesting for Zimbabwean companies to learn more about what trade means, as it is for European companies, also for Zimbabwean to say, what does it really mean if I'm in blueberries and I would like to export? What do I really need to do? So the whole seminar is first of all built for businesses. So I really tried to keep any institutional part in that forum as small as possible, because I know out of experience that if you have a company, you are interested in the facts. What do I need to know for investing in Zimbabwe? How do I get my money in? How do I get my money out? What paperwork do I have to do? Who are my potential contact points? So we try to make it as practical as possible. And then secondly, I think we did a fantastic job together with the CEDA and also CZI, SimTrade, to identify value chains which are good for Zimbabwe and good for the European Union. Because, it could not be the same, and sometimes maybe they're not the same. So we have identified 3 group of value chains which are mutually beneficial. The first one is horticulture, agriculture, and agro-processing. And I can give you more example about that afterwards. The second is renewables. And the third one is the mining value chain. And these are 3 value chains where there is mutual interest on both sides. And I feel there's a good interest and a good chance also to do some matchmaking between European companies and also local companies.
All right. And a country like Zimbabwe does not have the capacity to compete with established businesses in the Western world, such as the EU. How do we ensure that such a platform really does yield a win-win and a mutual benefit, as you say? And how is the EU working with the private sector to improve that capacitation of our local industries and local businesses?
Now, first of all, I think Zimbabwe is perfectly able to compete because you see, as I just said, we are the biggest buyer of horticulture products. Why is that the case? Because Zimbabwe is able to compete. And I think it is, in a globalized world, important that the private sector, which we can support and which we do support, and we do it actually very massively in Zimbabwe, is competitive enough to be able to compete on a global market. And the fact that you can export duty and tariff free to the European Union, and that is currently happening, is proof enough that Zimbabwe is competitive.
And how does the EU plan to ensure that the forum benefits not just large corporations, but also SMEs, women, and youth entrepreneurs? I know that the gender cluster is a key area that the EU is really partnering the government of Zimbabwe to push forward. How then are you ensuring that such a platform also benefits women and as I've said, youth entrepreneurs?
So first of all, I don't know exactly who will at the end participate, of course, because we have still a couple of weeks to go. But I don't think such a forum is essentially for the very big companies to start with. Because if you are a very big company, then you have your own network and you have your own contacts. You don't necessarily need a business forum to learn about it. I think the business forum in itself is probably addressed more to the mid-range of companies to start with. So I don't think it is a problem that there will be only big companies, because it's more the companies who might not have a specific international investment department, for example. They would come to a business conference because they're interested in learning and getting a crash course. What does it mean investing in Zimbabwe or doing trade with Zimbabwe? So first of all, I think there is no real competition with the big ones. Secondly, all our programs have a specific focus on youth and women, and then during the forum, we have the International Youth Business of Africa is a specific program which helps basically startups, in particular women and youth, with capital to grow and to help, and they can do pitches during the business forum. We have Digital Africa. It's a French-led initiative. Here, very concretely as well, startups can pitch, and then there will be a prize, and the prize is not just a check for $500, but it's capital for investment. We are talking $20,000-$30,000 for investment. I think that's fantastic. So there is a lot of focus also on youth, on women. And then, as I say, I give you just one example. A couple of weeks ago, I signed an on-lending facility. On-lending means our bank, the European Investment Bank, has made available 20 million euros. We signed with Stenbic for on-lending. That means Stenbic Bank is able to give a loan with a longer tenure, up to 7 years, with a lower interest rate. And the focus is what? Women and SMEs.
All right. And still on that, sustainability, Ambassador, is a key global concern. How will the forum address sustainable and green business practices and issues to do with the renewable energy? You gave us those 3 value chain areas, but sustainability, how will the forum address that?
So there will be not a topic sustainability per se, because the forum is aiming at bringing companies together, to start with. The forum is aiming at bringing in European companies, doing a matchmaking. There's a matchmaking platform with Zimbabwean businesses. The forum is there to learn about what it means invest and trade in Zimbabwe. The sustainability comes in with all the activities we are doing. When we talk about finance, when we talk about our programs, for example, for agriculture, sustainable agriculture, the sustainability, the climate aspect, the green aspect, all that, these are all requirements which we have anyway in our programs. So the financing and the support is what I would say in most cases linked to a sustainability aspect, and that is because under Global Gateway, our Global Gateway initiative, we would like to build sustainable connectivity and infrastructure in Africa. And sustainable means for the future, for generation, not destroying the environment, not for example, kicking communities out. We would like to have an inclusive way of doing that, using local know-how, local manpower to do it. And I think the sustainability aspect is more an aspect which comes into any program we are doing.
All right, so this is the discussion we're having, and we will continue after the news at 7 o'clock. My guest tonight is the head of the EU delegation to Zimbabwe, Ambassador Jobst von Kirchmann, and we discuss Zim-EU Relations after the news at 7 o'clock. Makaterera kunepfenyuro yesta FM tokupai now indaba.
Toll-free number,
Jobst von Kirchmann, as we discuss EU Zim relations and the upcoming EU Zim Business Forum. So do you keep your messages coming through on 0772162651, 0714414413, and I will be taking calls shortly. Now, Ambassador, the EU participated at this year's edition of the ZITF. How would you assess your participation and any notable successes or challenges?
I think it's not the first time we are participating. It's the third time. We started 3 years ago small and then bigger and bigger, and I think it's a growing success. And I must say the ZITF in Bulawayo is a fantastic platform. It's called the Zimbabwean International Trade Fair, but it's actually much more than a trade fair. It's a platform for exchange, for meeting people. Companies can meet others, etc. And if I look at our own growth as EU, I think we started with 2-3 member states a couple of years ago. Then we had 5, and this year we had 8. We have more and more companies, and that I must say is also. We were originally thinking perhaps to do the EU Zimbabwe Business Forum at ZITF, but then when we tested the waters, we we saw there is actually quite an interest in Zimbabwe as an investment opportunity. So we did a standalone event. But to tell you that also there was more presence of companies on our stand this year, and they were quite pleased with the traffic, with the people coming, with the exchanges they had with other companies. So I think it's positive. I also am very proud that we won for the third time a gold medal this year for the best engagement in trade and investment. I think that's very rewarding, and I must honestly say we do a lot for trade and investment with Zimbabwean private sector. So I think my team felt that was the right thing, because we are really focused on that. And I'm saying often we have put the private sector in the middle of our activities in this year. And I'm very pleased, and I hope we will have many more participations in ZITF.
All right, and what feedback did you receive from those 8 member states, the EU businesses that participated, and how does it form future engagements?
I think it was really positive, and I think, for example, the Swedish company Husqvarna, they are specialized in battery power tools. They had a traffic of people and an interest in their product which went well beyond their expectations. The same, I think, for Beka, as a Belgian company, on LED lighting and lighting and outdoor lighting. I think they had a huge interest as well of other companies, people. So I think the companies participating were very satisfied. Then we figured out we had quite a lot of European companies as well, which were spread out in other pavilions, which are bigger ones, which is fine as well. So I was joking. I said maybe one day we have the entire pavilion full with European companies. That would be fantastic.
So it is 10 minutes after 7 o'clock, and you can come through with any questions or contributions that you have regards our topic of discussion. And the number is 0772162651, 0714414413. You can come through on those numbers, and we have a caller. All right, so those are the numbers: 0772162651, 0714414413. I have in studio the European Union Ambassador to Zimbabwe, His Excellency Ambassador Jobst van Kirchman, as we discuss EU Zim relations. Star FM, good evening. All right, we seem to be having some bad luck there with our phone lines. And the ambassador has said, as far as the upcoming EU Zim Business Forum, they have identified 3 value chains: horticulture, agriculture, agro-processing as one, renewables, and as well as mining, which have been identified, which seek to give mutual benefit for both Zimbabwean companies and EU companies. Star FM, good evening.
Evening. How are you, Tilda?
This is Linda. Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. Just a quick question to His Excellence. Where are we with the comprehensive economic partnership agreement between Zimbabwe and European Union? Not the interim, but the comprehensive agreement. What's the stage of the negotiations now?
So I think we have a trade agreement in place, which is called interim. Mm-hmm. Is they still there?
No, yeah? they've dropped that. Okay. I'm sure they're following.
All right.
Yeah.
Which is called interim for a different reason, not because it's interim, it's definitive, because it's interim, because it's conceived as a regional agreement with 5 other countries, essentially in the Indian Ocean. Now, there is no temporary aspect to the current EPA or trade agreement. It's in place since years, and actually it was finalized, the Zimbabwean offer was finalized in 2022. What does that mean? As I said before, any Zimbabwean company can export any product tariff and duty-free to the European Union. But the European Union can only export around 80% of products to Zimbabwe. And these these tariff lines, which needed to be fixed, that was finalized in 2022. So it's final, it's there. And then there is another aspect. We are currently negotiating with with Zimbabwe and other countries a deepening of this trade agreement, which goes well beyond, which goes into investment, into services, into many other areas. There we are in the 15th round of negotiation, and we hope to conclude that soon, because that would be also an advantage for investment for Zimbabwe in the future. So we hope that all the countries being involved will move forward, and we will be able, maybe even this year, to conclude the last round of negotiations.
All right, let's take some more calls. 0772-162-651, 0714-414-413. That's the number that you can come through, and you can also send through your WhatsApp messages on that number. And a question here that is coming through on our studio WhatsApp platform reads... okay, I've lost track of that message, but it was around the PVO Act, and we are just trying to locate that message. But do keep your contributions coming through, and yeah, I think we have it here. So Mr. Makuvatsine says, now that we have the new PVO Act, will that affect EU support towards civil society organizations? But before you answer that, let me take another caller. Star FM, good evening. Tiripedu Makadiwo. Tinofara Mapinda Pachirongwa, you can talk to the ambassador.
Alright, naida ngoti chirongwa chenyu kufunakidza zvakateera kondinyo nechirongwa.
Aiwa, tinotenda chaizvo netsigiro yenyu yamunoramba muchitipa pachirongwa. So there was that message, ambassador, from our listener who is coming through on WhatsApp. Would you like to respond to that?
The same message you just read out?
Yes, on the PVO Act.
Okay, so there's a short reply and a longer reply. I will give you both, okay? The short reply is the European Union is a reliable partner to Zimbabwe, and it does not affect our funding to civil society organizations. That's the short reply. But I also would like to give a longer reply, because there were a lot of discussion about PVO bill. So you remember at the beginning of tonight, I was talking about the arrears clearance process. Now, the arrears clearance process is a process driven by the government. It's government-led. And the government has actually said that they would do certain things in order to pave the way for the arrears clearance. There are three aspects. The first one is the economic reforms we were just talking about, signing a program with the SMP. So the government is saying we want that. The second one are land issues, including now the title deeds which have been issued, etc. And the third one is that the government said, based on the National Development Strategy 1, we want to improve certain aspects of governance. And here are the indicators. And the PVO bill, which is actually not a bill, but it's an amendment act, actually goes in the other direction of what the government has proposed. So I think that's something which we are watching, where we are saying it's a pity, because at the end of the day, the European Union would like Zimbabwe to succeed in the arrears clearance process. We are a partner in that. We want them to succeed. So we want them that they live up to what they have proposed themselves.
So, Ambassador, you have said that the EU, and you specifically, you are interested in what you've called constructive engagement, which also respects the sovereignty of Zimbabwe. Some critics have said that Zimbabwe, as far as the PVO Amendment Act is concerned, has received disproportionate scrutiny and criticism by organizations, including the EU, where other nations from Mozambique to the US have enacted similar laws to meet international standards, and yet there's this outcry when Zimbabwe took that road. Would you like to explain more on that, given that we saw the EU announcing freezing support for governance projects under the ongoing structured dialogue following the presidential assent to the PVO Act?
So I think that's why I just talked about the arrears clearance. First of all, Zimbabwe is a sovereign country. the Zimbabwean government can enact any law they want. Let's be absolutely clear about that. What I think is more complex is if a government engages in an arrears clearance process and unilaterally, led by the government, says, we are doing 1, 2, 3. And then the government is doing an element which is the opposite of what they proposed, then I think as partners in that process, we are also entitled to say, that's a pity because we want you to succeed in the arrears clearance. Why are you enacting in PVO bill, which will make civic space shrink, while at the same time you self-proposed to increase civic space? That I think it's more complex, but it takes nothing away from the sovereignty of a country. Zimbabwe as a sovereign country can of course do that. And why do we have that difference is because Zimbabwe is engaged in an arrears clearance process. Other countries are not engaged in an arrears clearance process. So I think that's the difference. And collectively as partners, as I said, we want that Zimbabwe succeeds. It's a good thing for Zimbabwe because it will allow access to sovereign lending, it will allow to build infrastructure, etc. So that's why His Excellency put this process underway. It's a process which has been initiated by the government of Zimbabwe.
Right, and in its engagement with the Zimbabwean government, the EU's engagement with the Zimbabwean government, what concerns or what issues came from the government around that piece of legislation regards the concerns also raised by the EU? What was the engagement around the PVO Act? What were both parties saying? The Zimbabwean government, we've heard the concerns of the EU, but what were the justifications given by the Zimbabwean government? My belief then is that there were engagements around this piece of legislation.
As I was saying, the three tracks of the arrears clearance, one of these tracks is good governance, economic and land, 3 tracks. On the good governance track, the government proposed what they would do in the next couple of years based on the National Development Strategy 1. The indicators the government proposed, including the increase of civic space, are coming from the National Development Strategy 1. They have been proposed by the government. So of course, when you then see a piece of legislation which would not help the government in that way of clearing arrears, it's a pity. And we as partners, we ask the question, why is it necessary to have that? While at the same time, you would like to move forward on arrears clearance. And I must also say, we have seen in this process fantastic progress in other areas. I think quite a lot has been done on the economic reforms. The government proposed, the government did. The SMP is not yet signed, but I hear that it's going in a good direction. On the land issues, a lot has been done, and we commended that at multiple occasions. So why not doing everything? Why having one element which then it makes it more difficult to achieve it? I think it's more a question we raise because, as you rightly said, Zimbabwe is a sovereign country. They can at any moment also say, we stop that process. Yeah, but as I think it's a process which is in the interest of Zimbabwe and which the president put underway. Groups where we discuss. We are now setting up working groups called sector working groups in this platform, which has been set up by the government, and these are points which will need to be discussed.
All right, let's take some more calls. Star FM, good evening.
Hello?
Hello, yes, are you through to Star FM?
Yes, afternoon or evening. Government has a right in mind in respect of legislation that is needed. So in this instance, government, after taking legislation, because it is a well-known fact that the EU members, US, the white Western world, they use tactics of holding fast to sovereign
All right. Okay, we seem to have a poor connection, but I think the listener, the ambassador or the caller rather, maybe buttressing the point that you made, that government has a right to enact laws in line with what you've said. It is their sovereign right to be enacting such laws, and I guess then the question I was asking what the engagements were, because we did hear that the new law is aimed at ensuring that the country complies with the recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force to prevent the abuse of charities for the financing of criminal and terrorist activities. And as we have seen other countries also enacting similar legislation, then the question hence why the seemingly punitive measures and the disproportionate criticism and outcry over Zimbabwe putting in place such a law. I don't know if you'd like to respond to that last caller.
There comes a lot of question on PVO bill, but it's fine. I mean, the FATF requirement has been lifted in February 2022, so it's not a requirement anymore. So how can it be used for a new law if it's not a requirement? It's a very simple answer. So there is no FATF requirement since February 2022.
All right, let's take some more calls. Star FM, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. You're through to the program.
Thank you so much. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Sorry, maybe I'm out of topic or out of order. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Is it true that the professors in UCT are getting 250?
Sorry?
Is it true that the professors at the University of Zimbabwe are getting 250 as a salary?
Would you like to direct your question towards the issues that we have specifically for the EU ambassador? I'm not sure if he's in a position to then comment on salaries of professors at Zimbabwe's tertiary institutions.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So do come through on 0772162651, 0714414413. I have in studio the EU head of delegation to Zimbabwe, His Excellency Ambassador Jobst van Kachman, as we discuss EU Zim relations and the upcoming EU Zimbabwe Business Forum. If you have any questions regards that, the EU Business Forum, EU Zim relations, do come through on those platforms. And Ambassador, with regards to the EU Business Forum, what mechanisms are in place to ensure that commitments made during the forum are implemented afterward? Last week on the show, I had the ZITF company chairman, Busisa Moyo, talking about how they would come up with a compendium of some of the resolutions that came from ZITF to present to the Office of the President and Cabinet to ensure that their follow-up measures is followed through on some of the issues that were raised. How are you going to ensure that commitments made during the forum are implemented moving forward? But before you respond to that, let's take some more calls. Star FM, hello?
Hello?
Yes, are you through to the program?
Yes, Masarate.
Taskwera maskwera wataura izvenyu mongoti gagaga tigokwanisa kutora mwatereri.
Ndinongotara kuti pete mambomira onye kukolonaiza nyika nemachaina hamusadaro mami.
Tafunga kuti zvine mubvunzo wamuri kuda kubvunza EU head of delegation, chikumbiro chinenge chiri chekuti mukananganisa mibvunzo kana ma-contribution that the EU ambassador can actually respond to and not concerns or issues that are beyond his purview. So I hope you can bear with us there. Now, Ambassador, going back to that question, what mechanisms are there to ensure follow through on commitments that are made during the upcoming EU Zim Business Forum?
Thanks a lot, Linda. I think that's really a very important aspect, because obviously during a forum, a couple of days, people get together, they talk, they might say, it's maybe a possibility. So I think the first thing we do is the platform we create. We have created already the matchmaking platform will remain active. It will be a permanent platform. So you do not need necessarily a business forum for future matchmaking or for deepening the contacts with the company. And I think the second very important point, we discussed that with CEDA. CEDA will act and will be there for a follow-up. So if there is a matchmaking and companies are interested, SIDA will help the European part to go through administrative hurdles and support them. And I think that's a very important promise as well. And I think it also lives up to the idea that SIDA should be the one-stop shop. Because I think it is important for companies going in another country that they have ideally one contact point. If they have to go to many and then it's a contradicting information and they do not know, it's complicated. So I think SIDA wants to play that role, and I think it's a very, very good idea because it will help companies to find their way through often an administrative jungle. Might not always be easy, and whether that is here in Zimbabwe or in Europe, by the way, because we also have this idea of one-stop shops, it's actually a nice idea. And having SIDA committed to that task is something which I think is very good for a follow-up of the business forum.
All right, let's try some more calls. Star FM, good evening.
Yes, Linda.
Magasimbere, you're through to the program. Go ahead.
I'm super friend. I would like to ask the ambassador about. I once read about the EU funding on smallholder farmers. I want to ask you how can I access that program and what are the requirements?
All right, thank you very much. The ambassador is taking note. Let's take some more calls. Star FM, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes.
I'd like to just confirm, how do we get the opportunity to list ourselves in the forum? I do believe there's a forum that's coming up, and when is it coming up? Because the information is a bit vague on when this is happening and where it's happening.
All right. Thank you very much. So, yeah, that's the reason why we're having this show. And I will definitely make sure that you get all the relevant and necessary information. Thank you very much for that contribution. So the first caller, ambassador, talking about how they can access funding by the EU for smallholder farmers. And the second caller requesting more information around the EU Zim Business Forum, which has been center stage in our discussion this evening.
So maybe I start with the second one because the participation might also help a smallholder farmer afterwards. I think maybe we can give you afterwards maybe also the address where people can register. It's the 20th, from the 20th to the 22nd of May in the Makels Hotel. And it's free. You can register and you can participate. You have not to pay anything. There are some pre-requirements. You have to obviously be somewhere related to the value chains I was just mentioning. Apart from the three value chains, which are horticulture, agriculture, agro-processing, and here we're talking about berries, blueberries, we're talking about, for example, macadamia nuts, we're talking about cold chain, etc., renewable energy, where we talk about off-grid solutions and value and mining value chain, where we talk about supplies and services for mining value chain beneficiation. Apart from that, we have also cross-cutting issues on transport and logistic, technical and vocational training, and very importantly, financial services, getting capital, equity funds, for example. So I think the simple answer to the person just called is go on the internet, Google EU Zimbabwe Business Forum 2025. You'll probably find very easily the link for registration. But otherwise, we can also give you later the link, and you could say it orally here in Star FM, because I think it might be useful for people to get it and then to participate. Now, for the smallholder farmer, we have quite a number of different programs. It ranges from capital, which is made available through local banks, the on-lending facilities, because we figured out that often farmers in particular, and that's why we are focusing on horticulture and agriculture value chains, they need capital. They need capital to grow. And the loans which are given have an extremely short tenure. So offering a longer tenure, I think it's something very positive. In the last 6 months, I signed for 60 million euro these on-lending facilities. I was talking about Stenbik, but we also have it with NMB, for example. We have other banks. We work with CAPS, First Capital, etc. This is one element there are other elements. One is something which we're going to present during the forum. It's called Get Pro. It's actually free technical assistance to get bankable projects. That is in particular in the renewable energy sector. But again, it depends what a smallholder farmer wants to do. Is it an irrigation system, solar powered? It might qualify for that, and the person might want to get help through Get Pro, which we are going to present. We do a lot with smallholder farmers as well on the use of drought-resistant crops. We have seen El Nino last year, which had a devastating effect on Zimbabwe, and I think making drought-resistant crops available is something which helps farmers to have a better yield. And then there's so many other projects. That's why I say I think the Business Forum is a platform where you can probably already get something. Another way of doing it for a smallholder is going to the respective, let's say, smallholder farm and horticulture, could perhaps go to the Horticulture Council. The Horticulture Council works with that, is perfectly able to tell the farmer what programs are available in that sector.
All right. And how many businesses are we expecting to come through from the EU for the EU Zim Business Forum?
I hope we will have around 50 EU companies, and then we have maybe around 150, 200 Zimbabwean companies. That's what we're expecting. Yeah, it's the first time we are doing it, so it will a lot depend on mobilization. And as I said at the very beginning, it is important for European companies to come here. It is important to experience that country, the people. I think it is a positive experience, and that's why we also wanted to run it here, because I think investment is not a decision you can take on paper. You need to be in the place you want to invest, and you need to meet the people, and you need to talk to them, and you cannot do that remotely. So it's important to provide that platform where people can come. Now let's see. I hope it will be a big success and we will have a lot of companies. It's the first time ever, so we have no past experience to build on.
All right. And Ambassador, before we talk about the EU Day, which is coming up on Friday, the EU effectively no longer has any broad sanctions on Zimbabwe. Can you help us understand the current status of measures on Zimbabwe as per the last annual review and what these changes mean to Zimbabwe?
Already we had nothing which affected trade and economy, but we had one entity listed, which was the Zimbabwean defense industry, and we lifted that in last February. So we have nothing listed, no persons, no entities, nothing. We have an arms embargo with Zimbabwe and nothing else. So I think that's very progressive and has also shown a positive trend over the years. If you look back, each year, I think we were, or almost each year, we were taking off until now, where nothing is left, and I think that that goes together with the economic partnership we're also having as mutual partners with Zimbabwe.
What do you hope to achieve at the end of your tour of duty in Zimbabwe as far as EU-Zim relations are concerned? What is that thing that you say, I will have succeeded if this happens between Zimbabwe and the EU?
So there are several things, and some I might not see. It will happen hopefully after my time. I think we are on a good track trade-wise. I would like to see more of that, and the Business Forum is one element. ZITF is another one. All the support programs we have for companies to better understand the European market, or also for Zimbabwean or European companies to understand the Zimbabwean market, will help. So I hope this will gradually go. Now we had an increase in the last couple of years of around 20%. I hope to have more. In terms of investment, I think it is time, and that's why we are organizing this Business Forum, to look at the opportunities for European companies. And if I look back again, the last 2 years only, we had an increase by 300% of foreign direct investment from the European Union. That's great. That's great. And the Business Forum obviously agreement, we basically buy essentially from the agricultural sector. And I think that's a sector which I hope will also grow. And what I see, what has been put underway by the Honorable Minister Masuka, I think it's something which could potentially lead to a very positive development in the agricultural sector and to more trade. So I think the EU has a trade deficit with Zimbabwe. So we are actually buying more than Zimbabwe is buying from us, and we are not upset with that.
You had mentioned mining as one of the value chain areas, but as we end this show, Ambassador, the upcoming EU Day celebrations, which are happening this Friday, the 9th